Good afternoon. I'm Carol Newcomb-Maludo, a member of CMC's board. Today's forum, we will learn about the just announced modernization and investment in OSU's airport, Don Scott Field. There was a $10 million foundation gift from the Knowlton Foundation, and we are very happy today to have John Lindberg with us. John, please stand, who is with the Knowlton Foundation. Thank you. Now, introducing our speakers, we have David Williams. David, wave. He is the Dean of the College of Engineering at OSU. I've known him for a number of years. He also drives in car rallies, or if you want to know anything about car rallies, talk to David. And John Ehlers, president of the Northwest Civic Association. John helped me in 1998 get the EMBA program started at OSU through his simulation we did in the orientation session. So it's nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
And Doug Buchanan of the Columbus Business First will host this session. Please help me thank them and their associates who are here today. Thank you. Doug, the podium is yours.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for having me. As she mentioned, I'm with Business First. I'm the managing editor on the digital side of things, so I handle the website and a lot of the social media. So as you can imagine, I sit at my desk all day and I stare at Twitter on a screen going by, and I don't get out much. So this is great. The sun is shining outdoors. It's the first time I've seen the sun before 6 p.m. in a long, long time. So thank you for having me. I live I was just telling these guys, I live in Dublin, and so, you know, I hear the planes going over to Don Scott, so I do have a personal interest in this story. And obviously at Business First, we're very interested in economic development, so we're going to get to that in just a moment, the economic development impact of this airport. But I thought we would start, David, if you could just give us an overview of what this $10 million is going to do.
Certainly, Doug. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Clearly, you're all lacking for good entertainment at lunchtime, so, but nevertheless, I will attempt to help you with that. Let me add my thanks, of course, to John and the Knowlton Foundation for this extraordinary gift. What this will allow us to do is to renovate and extend our education and research facilities at the airport. As a College of Engineering, to which the airport reports, of course, education and research are our two main missions, as well as outreach to the community. There are about 500 students who are educated in various ways at Don Scott Field. And if you've ever been there, you will notice that the average age of the buildings is about the same age as me. And we have desperate need for modern education facilities. We train pilots, and there's a great national need for that. We also train airport managers, airport planners, and other people critical to the aviation industry. And the opportunity to integrate the education of those students with a modern terminal building, the terminal building is even older than me, will be the really transformational nature of that gift. Because if we're training students to work in airports, we want to train them in airports that were like the ones that have been operated today rather than the Battle of Britain. So the opportunity here is to integrate the operation of the airport with the education of our students. Likewise, research goes on at our airport. We have in the audience Mo Samimi and Jim Gregory, two of our leading aerospace researchers. There's several $1 million worth of research goes on at Don Scott Field, funded by companies like NetJets, a major donor to the airport, GE Aviation, one of the major employers of engineers in the state of Ohio. So the integration of education and research is going to be enhanced by this extraordinary gift.
Okay, and John, I'll kick this over to you. What was you said you both did a community panel. What is the community reaction to this announcement?
The economic development is a two-sided coin. On one hand, it's the engine that drives the quality of life that we all enjoy. On the other side, it represents change, and in that context, the uncertainty, people are always curious as to how that's going to impact their life. So this was back in June. We had Mike Duffy was there, Representative Duffy. He's here this evening, or this afternoon, thank you. And Dean Williams, William Murdoch from Morpsey, and a representative from the City Development Office, all talking about economic development in Northwest Columbus. And it was very encouraging that the story being told, and I think it speaks to Dean Williams' openness and approachability on some of these issues. The concerns, of course, are louder engines, more traffic, bigger jets, rattling windows, things like that. And as we covered some of these issues, we found out that as technology moves forward, engines get quieter. Each of these issues can be addressed. The economic development part, I think, is really the engine that will drive continued prosperity throughout Central Ohio, but specifically in Northwest Columbus. The other aspect that's of concern is, of course, the population growth. And how are we going to support the additional people that are forecast coming into Central Ohio? And so this sort of economic program is very important to us.
Sure. Now, the jets may be getting quieter, but you were saying, David, that you are going to, that this will clear the way to possibly build more hangars. So we should expect more jets or more planes coming in and out of the airport, right?
The relationship between building more hangars and bringing in more jets is not necessarily the case. We have over 100 of our current users of the airport who are waiting for hangar space. So our first job is to support our existing customers. When you've spent a significant amount of money on a business jet, you prefer to see it hangared. Okay. So that's our main concern, is to support our current customers.
Sure. And then what about the training planes? I mean, this is also a big part of it, right? That you'll get more capacity to put more students through.
We are rebuilding the fleet. We have 18 planes at Ohio State to train the student aviators, and we are in the process of upgrading that particular fleet so that our students can train on planes with modern avionics, such as they will meet in commercial cockpits.
Yeah, and flight simulators?
We've got a few of those too.
And you'll get more.
I hope so.
You hope, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
All gifts gratefully appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of these details are going to be rolling out. I think we have the preliminary overview of the plan, but maybe not necessarily a lot of the exact details.
Yes, indeed. It's only recently that we've been able to address this issue because of the uncertainty surrounding the airport over the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, and I don't know, we were talking at lunch, I don't know if any of you know this, but Ohio State was actively trying to sell the airport for 30 years, you said.
Yes, the first report that details the university's interest in monetizing the airport was 1984. And in fact, it's only because of the Knowlton's gift that we've managed to turn that conversation around. In fact, it was Gordon Gee who took me down to meet the Knowlton Foundation 4 years ago to thank them for the Knowlton School of Architecture in the College of Engineering. But Knowlton was much more interested in talking about aviation, and because Dutch Knowlton, who was a renowned Ohioan with many stories attached, which we don't have time to tell, was a great believer in general aviation, and he in fact founded Executive Jet, which became NetJets, again another supporter of Ohio State aviation. As we left that meeting, Gordon turned to me and said, "David, does this mean I can't sell your airport?" And I said, "You bet your sweet bow tie." Yeah. Yes, it's taken 4 years since then to both make the case that the airport is an important part of Ohio State's education, research, and outreach mission, and also that it doesn't make sense to turn it into a housing development and so on. So that was a long conversation, which only a year ago the Board of Trustees agreed that we would now start looking about investing in the airport, which is not in a good state because it hasn't been invested in for many decades.
It would be a very large housing development. The airport is approximately the size of Bexley. And I believe the acreage is comparable to Boston Logan Airport. If I remember correctly, it's the third busiest airport in Ohio. Is that true? Fourth biggest. Oops, okay. But it's, as a community airport, it's a very valuable resource. It also has a unique piece of property on the far west side, just behind the, what's the hardware?
Home Depot.
Home Depot store. There's a virgin forest back there. And to have a virgin forest in a urban area represents a perhaps unique in the entire country,
Sure.
a unique resource for research. So.
And David, you had mentioned to me earlier that this is, actually owning an airport is unusual, right, for a college?
Yes, yes. There are only 3 major universities, research universities in the country that own and operate their own airport, and that's Purdue, Texas A&M, and the Ohio State University. So when 200 engineering deans get together to have their once-a-year bragging competition, when I ask, so how's your airport doing, that usually ends the conversation. So it's both a very great opportunity for us to best our colleagues, but also a unique opportunity to integrate with industry and with the local community.
Yeah. I mean, one aspect of that, and again, going back to this economic development, you're growing the aviation program at Ohio State. I mean, it was bigger than I thought, but you're saying you're getting even more people going through there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there is a great interest in aviation. Boeing just published a report, actually it came out last week, that forecasts that the worldwide need for new pilots in the next 30 years is for 557,000 new pilots. And the need in the United States and Canada alone is 95,000. Now, don't worry, we're not going to start bringing in thousands of students. So we feel that in our current facility, we can grow by about 50%, and that would still be between 200 and 300 students learning to fly. So we can only sort of pick away at the national need for pilots. And all of you who have been at some airport and heard the announcement that because of a crew delay, you won't be taking off. And most of the time, that's because the pilot is not there. And the airlines themselves have not done a great job of encouraging young men and women to become pilots. However, this need will be crucial for all our future, and so we intend to grow the program as much as is appropriate within the space that we have.
Okay. John, can you kind of go back through the history a little bit of the kind of relationship between the neighborhoods around there and Ohio State?
Let me see, Northwest Civic, actually, we're celebrating our 50th year of community service at Northwest Civic. For those of you who may not be familiar with civic associations, they're very much like area commissions. They have relations with city council. If there is a variance, a council variance on a piece of property, if it's a rezoning, the first step in the process is to come before the community group and seek approval. We recommend to Development Commission, along with the city services and the Civic Association, recommend to council, and then council makes a decision. We are a little bit different than the area commissions in that we have a bit of autonomy. There are, I believe, 13 area commissions in the city, and there are over 200 civic associations. Some of them are pretty much neighborhood groups. Others are quite large. Ours extends between Upper Arlington and State Route 161 between the two rivers. We've got about 75,000 residents within our jurisdiction. So we've got a seat at the table at City Council. That's our valued relationship, but I really see us as being advocates for those who are seeking help with city services, delivery of city services to the residents. And so to have a large neighbor like the airport is some of the things that concern us the most. One thing is, I mentioned the population increase earlier. And the other one is the infrastructure that exists to support this population growth. The growth in terms of providing additional units is fairly easy if the banks are lending money. It's the providing the infrastructure that's tough, and specifically around the airport. Mm-hmm. We have we have Sawmill Road on the west side, but the other three sides are basically country roads. 161 is 2-lane. There are 5 jurisdictions that control 161 between Sawmill and Linworth. It's hard to believe. There's 3 cities and a township in the state. And if anything is going to change, they have to get unanimous consent from all 5. And on the south side of the airport was West Case. This used to be orchards. If we go back 30, 40, 50 years ago, there were orchards which then became farms, mostly for animal husbandry, things like that. But the roads haven't grown commensurate with that. So I think what we look at in terms of some of the potential impact of the airport decisions, and this was certainly came to a head, what you mentioned earlier about divesting the airport, is that the local infrastructure wouldn't be able to support that. And it still remains a concern as we see economic development within that area. We would hope that the university would take a look at the entire impact, not only for the opportunity to do outstanding research and to provide additional jobs, but also for help move people in and out of these locations. And these time horizons could be quite long. I will make a little side bet that the 161 at Linworth problem is not going to be resolved within my lifetime. And that's a difficult thing to come to grips with when you try to fight the battles on a year-to-year basis. So.
John, can I add to that? Yes, the university is clearly interested in the overall effect of any development at Don Scott Field. While the airport operations and the Center for Aviation Studies and the Aerospace Research Center all report to me as Dean of Engineering, there are several colleges actively involved in using Don Scott Field, not least of which is the College of Food, Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, which grazes animals out there in many of the acreage. The Board of Trustees owns land out there. The Fisher College of Business, students taking aviation management, study out there. The Geography Department, the Chemistry Department, all have active research out at the airport. So any decision by a single college is only part of the challenge of making a broader scale economic development the case. So we are just beginning that conversation within the university's infrastructure operation, and it will be a long conversation. I hope it is solved before the end of my lifetime. So.
Yeah, Sawmill traffic and 161 traffic, those are intractable problems that are not going to come easy. So, John, are you saying then that when Ohio State was talking about selling the airport, would you have been almost more concerned about that than you would have been maybe an expansion of the facilities at?
Certainly, by a couple orders of magnitude.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Just because of the amount of traffic and housing.
Right, and what happens is decisions are made on very short time horizons when you have land development. And the impact, it's whatever happens to be the current flavor. Right now we are sort of on the tail end of a big boom in apartments. We're starting to see a beginning of construction of condominiums, which from our perspective is a longer time horizon, a more sustainable type of growth. But if we happen to be at the wrong type of boom when, how many acres? How many thousand acres?
Well over 1,000.
Well over 1,000.
I think you said it was bigger than main campus, right?
I believe it is, yes.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Then you have a big rush to capitalize on the opportunity, and that represents a big concern for the community.
Yeah, right.
I think we should not forget the role of the airport itself as it exists in economic development. There are 850 employees at the airport. 1/3 of those are Ohio State students earning money to pay for their education. If you want to qualify as a pilot, there's 1,000 hours of flight time required above and beyond all your coursework. And we all know the focus on the cost of education that's been discussed here amongst many other places. So the ability of hundreds of students to earn money, to get their degrees, to get jobs, is an integral part of the role of the university in future economic development and workforce needs.
Yeah, the workforce needs is actually a pretty interesting aspect to this. Can you get into the partnership with NetJets and what that will mean for workforce development?
Certainly. NetJets, as all of you know, is a local aviation company that offers partial ownership of business jets. They have been partners with Ohio State Aviation for many years, long before I came here. However, in recent years, they have committed $3 million to the support of the Center for Aviation Studies, first of all, to help us grow our pilot base, but also to carry out research on next-generation air traffic control. And this is absolutely essential to the future aviation opportunities in this country. Currently, when you fly in a modern jet, you are guided from your airport of takeoff to landing through radio transmissions to radar posts that have been there, again, for about as long as I've been around. The opportunity is now to change the whole air traffic control system to one driven by GPS satellites. So every aircraft will have its own flight from point A to point B, which also means that every airplane will have a different landing path to the previous one, so no longer will aircraft come down the same landing path. For those of you who live in Worthington on the flight path like I do, the airport will be able to direct planes from many, many different angles to land at the airport to spread out the noise envelope. This next generation air traffic control is key to NetJet's future success because it saves them millions of gallons of fuel, because no longer will they and you circle above Reagan National or wherever you're going, waiting for air traffic control to bring you in on the old radio beacon. So the economic development opportunities of next-gen research is crucial, and we are one of the FAA's major centers of excellence for next-gen research, and that involves studies of general aviation safety, and also we were just announced as a partner in the FAA Center of Excellence to sort out the vexed problem of how civilian-operated unmanned aerial systems interface with the civilian air traffic.
That's drones, for those of you who are unaware of the euphemism here.
I do want to get to that.
Shucks.
Yeah, let's make that. Let's say in a few minutes we're going to do audience questions, but let's finish with this drones thing in the main portion. Could we see drones flying over Worthington?
They probably already do, but not legally. I think there is no doubt that the private use of drones will continue to increase. It's already out there. You've all heard of Amazon and now Macy's wanting to give you on same-day delivery of whatever you've ordered, and this is one route to that. More importantly is the danger associated with uncontrolled flights of such vehicles. Again, if you read in the newspaper recently the wildlife fires in California, the firefighters flying helicopters and planes have been troubled by the presence of drones in the area that they're trying to put out the fire, as local civilians send their cameras aloft in their drones to get great pictures of the fire. So the danger to civil aviation in all respects, including commercial aviation, of unregulated drone flight is huge, and the FAA rightly is concerned, and that's part of our research over the next several years. And of course, again, that's helped through support from NetJets.
What do you mean by your research over the next few years? Like, what exactly are you doing?
Trying to understand the difficulties of incorporating private drone flight into general aviation space. How do you do that? At the moment, you say you can't do it. Yeah. But at some time or other, we're going to have to deal with that. Now, we happen to be one of the few general aviation airports that has an FAA tower. So the FAA is already active at Don Scott Field and controls all the flights into and out of Don Scott Field. We are a general aviation field. We have 4 runways. So we can close runways down at our discretion to do testing in ways that would be rather difficult, say, at Port Columbus or O'Hare. So we have the FAA control, we have the airport, we have the runways, and we have the researchers who are actively doing drone research on campus. So we have all the pieces to help the FAA solve this vexed problem.
Yeah. Are you involved with the Ohio Uas Center or something like that?
Yes, we are. We have a strong partnership with Sinclair Community College.
Right.
In fact, Wayne Struble asked us to lead the overall university efforts in the unmanned aerial systems, the politically incorrect phrase which we use, rather than drones, which only gets people annoyed.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting, that, there's a lot of money coming into to research, and I know our sister paper in Dayton has talked to Sinclair Community College a lot about trying to get some of this money into Ohio and establish, Ohio as a center for UAS drone research, and I would expect Ohio State would be, a pretty big partner with that. And John, do you hear any concerns in the community about stuff like that?
When I tell the story, and I first met with Dean Williams back in February. He invited me down to his office with the airport manager, who is an adjunct board member of our organization. It's part of the liaison that we have between the airport and the community. And I first heard the story back in February, and then I've heard it a couple times since, and I've learned little bits and pieces that I like to repeat, and it's the drone comment that causes the roll of the eyes, and let's see what happens with that. And I think it comes from movies and things like that. But it also represents something that can be an intrusion, and I think it needs to be well monitored. But I'm sure with the awareness and just in keeping it in the conversation that it will be. Yeah.
I don't want to say that this happened down south, but I remember seeing a news story where some guy was taking a shotgun and trying to shoot a drone out of the sky. Did anybody remember hearing about that? That was rather interesting. Okay, I'm going to read this statement, which I take it you guys have heard before. It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Please step to the microphone, give us your name, and ask your question. And thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments.
Good.
And if it's a drone question, please use unmanned aerial systems so that there's no editorializing. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Dean Williams, I'm Kathy Fox. We've met a few times. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the research that your engineering faculty and students are doing at the airport, to the degree that it's not proprietary information.
No university research is proprietary information, and if you've got half an hour, I'll tell you everything that we're doing. I've already mentioned the research into next gen and UASs. At Dr. Samimi's Aerospace Research Center, I mentioned also GE Aviation's testing of its main engines. There are 30 GE engineers at Don Scott Field currently studying for their masters and PhDs and working on GE's engines, doing full-scale testing of those engines. Just an extraordinary facility, the Gas Turbine Lab. Dr. Samimi himself is an expert in noise. Many of our faculty are experts in noise, but Mo in particular is an expert in jet turbine noise, which of course is of great interest to anybody near any airport. Mo works with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. A lot of funding from that particular arm of the U.S. Air Force comes to the Aerospace Research Center there. The work that's done in all of our research centers is funded by the federal government, sometimes by the state government, but also by industry. And the Aerospace Research Center is no exception. About $4 million a year of contract research goes through that one center.
Yeah, I always associate GE Capital with Cincinnati, but I did not realize they had an actual dedicated facility.
Well, that's GE Aviation, not GE Capital, but it's...
Or GE Aviation, sorry, GE Aviation, sorry. Yeah, GE
well,
Aviation.
We could try working with GE Capital.
Yeah, get some funding. Okay, next question.
Marianne Potter Lewis. My question is that this spring I heard that along with the Marion prison, that Ohio State also had 9 acres that they were trying to sell, or the state of Ohio had 9 acres to sell at Don Scott Field. Has that come to fruition, or has that gone away as well?
There is a lot of land at the airport, as we mentioned, and it's owned by many different parts of the university. As far as I'm aware, nobody's sold anything yet, at least they haven't told me, but that might not be surprising. The university is looking at the very early stages of the overall land management for the university and what is best for our educational research mission and, of course, for the community outside. So no is the answer, and if I'm wrong, I hope one of our colleagues at this table will leap up and correct me. There's all shaking their heads. So no, we haven't sold it, right?
You're saying the airport does not need the entire footprint that they have?
No, it does not. The FAA mandates a certain area in which, of course, there can be no building, or if there is building, such as a terminal or a tower, then there are very strict regulations about the scale of that operation.
Okay.
As you get outside the FAA mandated no build land, then height restrictions are removed sort of progressively further away from the flight paths of the airport.
Okay.
In everything that we do at the airport, every design, every decision, the last step in approval is with the FAA. And if you think universities have slow bureaucracies, then the FAA is even slower.
Gotcha. Okay, next question.
I'm Warren Fishman. I have a similar question, actually. First of all, I'm thrilled that the OSU is committed to keep the airport there. Mr. Solov, a developer who is renowned at Ohio State, told me about 10 years ago when I was talking to him about congestion on Sawmill and 161, he said, you can't imagine congestion until you see that airport sold and we get in there and do mixed-use development. So I'm really thrilled. I was wondering about the pig farm and the land. When you say 1,000 acres, does that just include the airport, or does that include the land, the pig? We call it the pig farm, the farm, the Ohio State farm, and I know they're not using it as much anymore. Is that included is in the commitment?
In the total acreage is, I say, well over 1,000 acres. That includes all the land that's currently operated by the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Sciences. So yes, Bruce McFerrin, the dean there, and I work very closely together. He's part of the conversations as to how the current use that the college has for agricultural needs, how that's going to develop. Bruce is a slightly bigger landowner than I am when it comes to the acreage that he has access to across the state, and he's looking at whether the airport is the best use of that land. But again, very, very early stages of this discussion.
Is the agricultural land part of the buffer zone that you were talking
Yes, we generally try and keep the pigs off the runway.
So
Shoo them off.
The pig is on the south side of West Case. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that commitment doesn't include that farm, is what you
South side.
The south side of South Case Road, I say that is under Bruce McFerrin's leadership. There are certainly no reasons from an airport operational standpoint why we would wish to lay claim to that land, and I would hate to speak for another dean. It will only get me into trouble. So.
Thank you.
We just recently did a story that I know the agriculture department is looking at what they're doing over on West Campus, because they have a farm out there, and we asked them, is all of this planning, including the area up around there, and they said not at this time. This is strictly just a West Campus farmland thing. So as far as we know, there should be no change up by the airport for that. Go ahead.
Hi, Chrissy Scott. I'm curious, it sounds as if you will be building a new terminal, and I'm wondering if a new terminal is built, would it be on the north or the south end of the runway?
Yes, indeed, we will build a new terminal. Otherwise, John will take me to task. So the current design in the very early stages, not vetted by the FAA, is to build it in the same region that the current terminal is, and to expand that area and include new hangars there as well. So we don't intend to move the site of the entrance off Case Road.
There is a PDF up on osuairport.org that will show you a current plan for not only the terminals, but also the additional hangars, change in the roadway, and some other features that they're proposing.
What do you mean by changing the roadway?
Different entrance coming in. The one right now is right next to the fire station, and they're going to move that east.
Oh, okay.
A couple hundred yards or something.
Okay. Staying at the same access road.
Same access area, still from the south, but not at the same location.
Yeah.
Again, very, very preliminary and not FAA approved.
I hear you. I hear you.
Just making sure you get
I
that.
get you.
So.
I get you. Yeah. Well, everything's subject to change. Has everybody been out to the OSU airport? I mean, it's old.
You bet.
Yeah, and I guess from what we were saying is that was quaint. Is that what you said?
Quaint, yeah.
Quaint, yeah. That's one way of putting it. And again, that was because of the uncertainty. So it just has never been updated.
Exactly, yes. Now we have certainty, and in 5 years' time, I trust you won't recognize it.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even a coat of paint. So.
Needs
Go
more
ahead.
than that.
Yeah.
Lee Martin, I'm a user of the airport and a neighbor, and I'd like to make the statement that at least Brookside Civic Association and other residents would welcome expansion of the airport over commercial or residential development along 161. And my question is, do you envision an FBO on the north side of the runway in the vicinity of the National Guard area at any point in your future development?
Again, not that I'm aware of. The National Guard we work with very closely, and those of you who were around a couple of weeks ago will have seen members of the National Guard leaping from a perfectly good plane to land at Don Scott Field. So we interact not just with the commercial side of our community, but also with our defense forces.
Okay. Next question.
Dean Williams, thank you for coming today. I'm Scott Whitlock, a member of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, and for several years I served as the City of Worthington representative to the Dean's Advisory Committee on the airport. For a number of years, the airport has, in the past, has sought to extend the north runway and to really develop the Don Scott Field as a major center for corporate jet aviation. Is that still in your plans to do that and to compete with Port Columbus and Rickenbacker in that area?
The expansion of the North Runway has been in our 10-year plan for the last 30 years and will continue to be so. There is no intention to compete with Port Columbus for commercial aviation. There is no intention to compete with Rickenbacker for cargo. There is every intention that we will make this airport the very best general aviation field for education and research and to serve the community. Let me address the issue of airport extension. There is a generally perceived conclusion that longer runway equals bigger jet equals more noise. We can already take at Don Scott Field some of the largest commercial jets. A Boeing 737, Southwest Airlines flies hundreds of them, can land at Don Scott Field if it so wishes. In fact, for those of you with really long memories will know that a Boeing 707 landed there 50 years ago. It wasn't quite meant to land, but it did, and got off again safely. So we have a runway length that is perfectly capable of handling much larger aircraft than come in. The point of extending a runway is threefold. First of all, it helps with next generation air traffic control. In fact, approaching pilots can land at a steeper angle to a longer runway, thereby causing less noise in the flight path into the airport. So a longer runway would reduce noise from every aircraft that's approaching on that runway. Second, for those business planes that fly out of Don Scott Field, many of our major partners, let me pick out Cardinal Health here because they have made this very plain, when they wish to fly to the West Coast, which they do on many occasions, they cannot take off with a full load of fuel because the airport runway is too short. So Cardinal Health and other major industry users have got to land their planes somewhere else, Denver or Utah or wherever, on the way to the West Coast, and that goes right to their bottom line. So a longer runway would allow Cardinal Health and many others to get off with a full load of fuel, and that fuel would also be bought at Don Scott Field, and the profits would go to the engineering college. And the last and the most important is that a longer runway will allow all our current users to land under much safer conditions. When the runway is compromised, for example, by heavy rain or by residual snow that wasn't cleared off by the plow, many of our customers cannot land on the current airport runway because they need a larger safety margin in compromised conditions. Those planes then fly to Port Columbus. And so the plane, instead of being at their hangar close to their business, is now at Port Columbus. So more research and better landing conditions. better economic development for our customers, and safer landing for all pilots of all planes. That's what runway extension is all about.
And David, how many corporate clients do you have out there, and how many planes are we talking about?
We have well over 100.
Clients?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that goes from individuals who own their own planes to corporations,
Right.
to the governor, to ODOT, to the CIA, I shouldn't mention them, to many other federal and state operations, and MedFlight, which operates helicopters out of the north side of Don Scott Field.
Okay, all right. Note to myself to follow up on CIA at Don Scott.
And the Drug Enforcement Administration. If
Good, all the better.
Full
There we go.
disclosure to the...
Yeah, all right. There we are. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Janet McLaughlin, and I'm a resident of the Northwest area. I live off a sawmill in Brookside Colony, and I took some notes that with the new technology, planes will be quieter. And right now I am experiencing significant noise in my neighborhood with the training of the pilots, and they fly every day, 7 days a week from morning till night, and my windows do rattle. So what is your prediction for when these planes will be quieter?
Already is the answer, and we are in the process, I mentioned, of replacing our fleet of 18 planes, some of which are also of the same vintage as the airport. The latest trainers are significantly quieter than the most of the ones that we have. The latest personal aircraft are far quieter than some of the flying lawnmowers that you hear owned by individuals who use Don Scott Field. And lastly, the corporate jets of today are extraordinarily quiet, in part because of the research that Dr. Samimi and his team have been doing for decades out at Don Scott Field.
Okay.
Actually, I have one question also. I know. When is your busiest season? We live in Worthington, and occasionally we hear planes, but it seems like there's a season that's a little busier for you than others.
Yes, there is. There is an organization called SafeCon, which is a network of all of the universities around the nation that have aviation programs. And once a year, the student aviators from around the nation gather to learn how to fly safely and take off and land safely. And SafeCon has been held at Don Scott Field on a few occasions, and certainly for the last couple of years. And in fact, during that time, Don Scott Field is the busiest airport in the nation in terms of takeoffs and landings. And so that is our heavy season. And as long as all the other universities can invest in their fleets as we do, we can hope that that will, if it continues at Ohio State Airport, will be a lot quieter than it has been in the past.
I thought for sure you were going to say the Memorial.
That's up there.
Right?
Oh,
And Michigan home games, I think, are up there as well.
Yeah, those are all the wealthy alums and the wealthy golfers, so they have really quiet planes. So.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed today's forum. Remember, you can view and share all of our forums on CTV, Columbus Television, and WOSU, and our PBS affiliates. Also, before we close, I think we need to thank our sponsors, as well as our speakers, Dean David Williams, John Ehlers, and Doug Buchanan. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.